Over the last 3 decades, Mario Kart has become one of the most iconic parts of gaming history, but the reason for its iconic status can't be entirely attributed to its wide appeal. No, it's a shortcut that not only broke Mario Kart, but in a way, mended it to the status it's at now. This is that story of how players broke every single Mario Kart game. Now before we look at the first Mario Kart game, I think it's important that we take a brief look at what a shortcut really is. As we all know, shortcuts come in many shapes, sizes, and forms, but the main differentiation I want to make is the differentiation between intended and unintended shortcuts. Intended shortcuts are, of course, shortcuts that the developers of the game purposely put in for you, but non-intended shortcuts are where things get interesting, crazy, and complicated. So starting with Super Mario Kart, which released all the way back in 1992, we are met with a lot of intended shortcuts, as there are plenty of places in which you can use a shroom or even some skilled movement that cuts small portions of the track. However, if you have a really good grip over your kart, then you are able to drive around tracks like KVD and beat every single track in under 30 minutes. But the shortcuts don't end with just hype movement around the track, as there is one item that allows you to take Super Mario Kart shortcuts to the next level. This would be the feather power-up, which is an item that is exclusive to just this game, which kind of makes sense when you consider the fact that you're able to do shortcuts such as this one in Bowser's Castle. But wait a minute, how is this even possible? Well, usually, when you go off of the track, Lakitu will simply just bring you back to where you started. But if you are able to cover enough distance and are simultaneously on the second to last lap, then you are not only able to trigger the last lap, but then complete the last lap, as Lakitu will be confused when it comes to what to do with you, meaning that he'll just say, yeah, just take the final lap, man. Outside of this particular use, the feather is just good for various cuts, as it's able to get that heightened distance that is unattainable with the mushroom. While this is the first Mario Kart, it definitely isn't the most broken one, as things get a lot crazier in Mario Kart 64. Released in 1996, this game features 16 distinct tracks, and within those 16 tracks, there's quite literally a game-breaking shortcut on almost every single one. While I won't be able to showcase everything in this game, just like I won't be able to showcase everything in every game, I can most certainly show off the highlights because Mario Kart 64, as well as the future titles, get freaky. Near the start of Mario Kart 64's life, a decent amount of unintended shortcuts were discovered by the community, such as this leap of faith on Rainbow Road or this skip on Wario's Stadium. As time progressed, more complicated shortcuts would be discovered, such as the Weather Tanko, which was proposed by Weatherton and Inhitenko. This shortcut is possible for a few reasons. In this game, you are able to do a wall bounce with the help of a hop alongside a mushroom. If you are able to do this bounce and hit a specific part of the wall, then your character will barely touch the region in which the Choco Mountain Tunnel is located. Since you are able to barely graze the tunnel, the game will think that you are actually inside the tunnel, meaning that if you are able to land on the other side of the finish line, then you will be able to count the lap despite not driving around the track at all. But in 2020, a special someone would kickstart an explosion in shortcut discovery. His name was Forest64. The first shortcut he would show off would be this one on Royal Raceway, in which you can use these red shells to propel yourself up to this area, which allows for you to spawn in front of the finish line and get your lap to count. Forrest would then go on to show off this shortcut on Toad's Turnpike, this shortcut on Sherbet Land, this shortcut on Bowser's Castle, and plenty more. These shortcuts got so insane that it wasn't uncommon for players to complete a lap in under a second. Yes, you heard me right. Players were able to complete laps in under a second. While each shortcut of course has its own quirks and reasons as to why it is possible, there is one common factor that allows for Mario Kart 64 to be as broken as it is. This common factor would be the fact that the game does not have a checkpoint system. You've probably heard this term before, but if you haven't, a checkpoint system is simply just the game's way of checking to see if you've legitimately driven around the track or not. Checkpoint systems are different across Mario Kart games, whether it be the conditions in Double Dash, which entail your lap to not counting if you skip more than 50% of the track, alongside these two other conditions, or Mario Kart Wii, in which the game checks to see if you are driving through the track by scattering key checkpoints throughout each map as a means of lap completion. However, Mario Kart 64 still checks to see if you are driving through the track, even if there's no checkpoint system in place, because otherwise, you would be able to just go backwards and then forwards again to count a lap. But you know what? You can do something pretty similar to going backwards and then going forwards again. This is the .01 lap. The .01 lap isn't just possible on Luigi Raceway though, it is also possible on Toad's Turnpike and Yoshi Valley, and yes, a lot of this is humanly possible. 5 years after the release of Mario Kart 64, Mario Kart Super Circuit would be released on the Game Boy Advance, and similar to Super Mario Kart, there were a plethora of ways in which you could cut off small portions of the track, but there weren't really any game-breaking shortcuts. That was until players introduced TAS into the equation. You see, TAS, or tool-assisted speedruns, allowed for players to dissect the game piece by piece, meaning that things that are not humanly possible can be achieved within the TAS as you are dissecting the game alongside inputting each individual input your character is performing. While TAS has worked wonders for multitudes of games, the TAS for Mario Kart Super Circuit is unlike anything I've ever seen before. Not only is the movement impeccable, but some of the cuts within the tracks themselves are absolutely ridiculous. For example, this is what Rainbow Road looks like. Because of these little bouncy rails, you are able to do some sort of shortcut at almost every single turn, but it gets even crazier as you're able to do stuff like this. That's right, Mario Kart 64 isn't the only game in which you are able to complete a 1-second lap. Now you would think that things would get even crazier with Mario Kart Double Dash considering the trends we've seen in the last 3 Mario Kart games, but it's actually quite the opposite. At least, that's what it initially seemed like. When the game first came out, there was one unintentional shortcut found, this shortcut being this glitch on Waluigi's Stadium. But for 15 years straight, there would be no new unintentional shortcuts discovered. It seemed as if Mario Kart Double Dash was unbreakable. However, when the 15th year rolled around, top player Goomba would lead the community into a search. This search would be the search for how the checkpoint system worked. You see, Double Dash wasn't unbreakable, it was simply just misunderstood for the longest time. But with the efforts of Goomba, Tarza, Lothjohn, alongside other community members, the 3 golden rules of Double Dash were formed. Shortly after the formation of these golden conditions, Double Dash would enter a renaissance. Thanks to Goomba, this renaissance would begin on Mushroom Bridge, with this shortcut in which you do this Lakitu hop, followed up by this hop off of the bridge. While this shortcut doesn't look that difficult, it requires extreme precision. When you are making your way from this bridge all the way to this section of the track, you have to drive off of the bridge at the exact right time, because otherwise you will either fall short of where you need to be, or your lap will not count as a result of breaking the 50% rule. However, this renaissance of shortcuts definitely wouldn't end on Mushroom Bridge, as even crazier shortcuts were found. A technique called the A-Tech hop, which is essentially the only way you are able to get a hop in this game, was used on Bowser's Castle to pull off this shortcut. Another top player by the name of Matthew would go on to discover this shortcut on Mushroom City, in which you're able to get this crazy bounce, which allows for you to reach a zone of the map that makes it so that you're able to drive through the rest of the track and get your lap to count. After this discovery, which was made in 2021, crazy shortcuts on Luigi Circuit, Dry Desert, and Wario Coliseum would all form. So while this game has been out for almost 20 years now, the realm of possibility is only just now being explored. So there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that things will get freaky within the next decade or so. Similar to Double Dash, Mario Kart DS is in a similar boat when it comes to the shortcuts. Unintentional shortcuts were quite far and few between, but that didn't mean that the mechanics of the game were unexploitable. In fact, the mechanics within MKDS were absolutely shredded to pieces with the help of a certain dry bones, alongside a technique called snaking. Snaking in itself is actually a pretty simple concept, as all you do is wiggle your cart left or right while chaining boosts. However, if we look at a random world record, like, I don't know, this world record on Mario Circuit by MK Dasher, you'll see that he not only does this cool little shortcut that I wanted to include in the video, but you'll also see that he is snaking at almost every single possible moment. The same can be said about snaking for quite literally every single other world record. While big unintentional shortcuts are scarce within Mario Kart DS, they definitely aren't non-existent, as there's one absolutely crazy shortcut that you can pull off on Rainbow Road. The first part of the shortcut involved doing this gigantic hop to this part of the track. However, if you were to finish the lap after doing this hop, then your lap wouldn't count as a result of the checkpoints within the game. But if you fall off of the track after doing the hop, then you're able to complete a lap of Rainbow Road in just 31 seconds. And yes, the egg vehicle is a must. Now, we've seen crazy shortcuts, absurd respawn glitches, and even 0.1 second laps. But there's one thing that we haven't seen yet. This one thing would be none other than Mario Kart Wii. MK Wii is, and has been, absolutely broken beyond belief. Broken to the point where there's not only unintentional shortcuts littered throughout the game, but there's a special type of shortcut on almost every single track. This would be the Ultra Shortcut. While shortcuts such as this hop on Mushroom Gorge are unintentional shortcuts, cuts such as this one on Grumble Volcano are ultra shortcuts, as they directly exploit this game's checkpoint system. Speaking of which, players would find out how the checkpoint system worked relatively fast, and with this checkpoint system, they would find one flaw that would lead to the discovery of many more ultra shortcuts. MK Wii requires that you drive through all of the key checkpoints in order when it comes to getting your lap to count. The caveat here, though, is that it doesn't keep track of whether or not you've actually driven through the map, but rather uses a few conditions to satisfy a lap completion. Condition 1. The game must have the last key checkpoint of the lap loaded before crossing the finish line. Condition 2. Not all of the key checkpoints are loaded upon entering the track. For example, if you are within the region of key checkpoint 3, then the only other key checkpoints that will be loaded will be key checkpoint 2 and 4. But if you had just driven past key checkpoint 3, then 4 would be the only one that is loaded. This condition is in place because it means that you must satisfy the first condition, as in theory, doing a large skip would make it so that your lap wouldn't count, as the last key checkpoint before the finish line would simply not be loaded. However, if you are able to make it to the last key checkpoint of the lap without the game detecting that you're going backwards through the finish line, then you are able to get your lap to count. This is what allowed for a revolution in Ultra Shortcut discovery. In Mushroom Gorge, you are able to scale up this wall as a result of preserved momentum from this mushroom, which in turn allows for you to load the last key checkpoint within Mushroom Gorge. In Wario's Gold Mine, you are able to bounce off of this pipe, which once again allows you to load the last key checkpoint and complete the lap without the game detecting that you are going backwards. The same idea even applies to Coconut Mall, in which you clip out of bounds here, drive out of bounds until you reach Region 0, in which you then carefully maneuver your way through the parking lot so that you stay in Region 0 before eventually triggering the final key checkpoint region that will allow for you to count the lap. But one trick would take this game by storm. This would be the wall clip. Using a wall clip, you are able to cover unheard of distance, and this once again opened the gateway for more shortcuts, whether it be this clip on Sherbet Land, these two clips on Ghost Valley, these tree clips on Mario Circuit, Peach Beach, and DK Jungle Parkway, alongside a few other wall clips. Thanks to the help of not only the community, but specifically people who use tasks to make groundbreaking discoveries, there are now 24 ultra shortcuts within MK Wii, whether it be this one on Bowser's Castle, this one on Moo Moo Meadows, this one on Daisy Circuit, or this one on Rainbow Road. While all of these aren't humanly possible, the proof of concept within itself is just absolutely mind-boggling. When December of 2011 rolled around, Mario Kart 7 would make its debut on the 3DS, and while unintentional shortcuts were very far and few between at the start of the game's lifespan, discovery would ramp up, and it would ramp up fast. Similar to Mario Kart Wii, players would take great advantage of the game's checkpoint system, even if they didn't fully understand the inner workings of the system at the time, which created for shortcuts such as this one on Woohoo Loop, or this one on Maku Woohoo. But Mario Kart 7 had one thing that no other game before it had. One thing that would create never before seen shortcuts. This would be the glider. Now at first glance, the glider just seems like any other core mechanic, and for the most part, that is what it is. But the places you are able to go and the things you are able to do are what make the glider so special. On DK Jungle, you can skip the entire temple. In Maple Treeway, you are able to skip a large portion of the track, and in Rainbow Road, you are able to do this. But there's much more to Mario Kart 7 than just respawn and glider shortcuts. There is this cute little shortcut on GBA Bowser Castle, this insane out of bounds clip in Daisy Cruiser, this leap of faith in Neo Bowser City, this trick in Luigi's Mansion, this glitch shortcut on Koopa Cape, and more. But how are all of these shortcuts getting discovered, and why are they even possible? Well, like I said earlier, a decent amount of these shortcuts are possible as a result of exploitation from the checkpoint system. That's obvious. But when it comes to their discovery, 100% of the credit goes to its community. In fact, all of the shortcuts across every single Mario Kart game are all a product of the community's hard work. While there is too many people for me to name in a video, I will have links upon links to them in the description, so I highly encourage you to check out all of these hardworking and interesting people. Anyways, I'm not done talking about Mario Kart 7, because there's one more thing I want to mention. Mario Kart 7 had a few tasks that showcased crazy shortcuts such as this skip on Airship Fortress, but there was one special task that quite literally had a shortcut on every single turn of the track. This is the SNES Mario Circuit 2 task. Now if you want a more in-depth video about the track, then MK William has a fantastic video on the subject, but as you'll see, they'll use this ramp to get on this part of the track, in which he then does this hop, which skips more of the track, followed up by another hop that skips more of the track, before finally using the glider in this little bouncy rail to skip even more of the track, before doing it all over again on laps 2 and 3. While Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has been optimized beyond belief within the last few years, there hasn't been any groundbreaking shortcut discoveries, as this game has very robust systems in place that ensure that the player won't even skip the smallest portion of the track. I mean, sure, there are a few unintentional shortcuts, such as this one on Big Blue, or even maybe this one on DK Summit, but as far as breaking the game is concerned, the code has yet to be cracked. But I wouldn't doubt Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I mean, just look at Mario Kart Double Dash, it went 15 years without any new shortcuts. If there's anything that I've learned while making these videos, it's the fact that the communities behind these amazing games will always find a way to break the unbreakable. So even if this is where the story ends today, it most certainly isn't where the story ends for the time being. For as long as there is Mario Kart, there will be a person out there who changes Mario Kart forever.